Rachel. Thanks, everybody. Thanks. Can I do a quick show of hands about how many people think the internet is, if not killing, that's a pretty big word, but undermining democracy at the moment? And how many people think that it's not? It's helping, or it's, all right, pretty split room. I want to try and explain to you why I think it is harming democracy, but not in the ways that are usually talked about. Now, I've got a book about this, which isn't for sale, so I'm not going to do a big pitch, don't worry. But the subtitle is How the Internet is Killing Democracy. Now, I wanted it to be called How the Internet as Currently Constituted is Undermining Liberal Representative Democracies. But Random House weren't going to go for that, hence the big title. I thought I would start with my dear friend, Bond villain lookalike Alexander Nix, CEO of Cambridge Analytica. And one of the reasons is I did a television series with the BBC about this over a year ago now, and everyone ignored it. Well, they didn't when The Observer wrote about it. I'm not bitter or jealous about this. Honestly, it's fine. But I think the story of Cambridge Analytica, which I'm guessing you're fairly familiar with, I think has been mistold. I think it's been mischaracterized. I want to tell you what I think is really happening here. The story of Cambridge Analytica, as commonly described in the press at the moment, is that this gentleman, along with his colleagues, somehow managed, mostly through targeted Facebook adverts, to change the minds of millions of voters. People who would have otherwise voted for Hillary Clinton saw some Facebook adverts and decided that actually they're going to vote for Donald Trump instead. I don't know if anyone works in digital advertising here, but if only it were that easy to do. A lot of people that do work in digital advertising, following the story of Cambridge Analytica, and many of my friends work, well, I wouldn't call them friends, many people I know work in digital advertising. I think they were watching this all unfold, thinking to themselves, oh my God, we're doing way worse than what this guy's been doing. Why is everyone so surprised about what they've been up to? And I think that's the more interesting story here. Now, I'm going to tell you what they actually did because I followed it in great detail, interviewed Alexander Nix, even went over to San Antonio, Texas, where Cambridge Analytica were based during the 2016 election, and interviewed the person that was writing and designing a lot of the digital content that they were using to advertise. Brilliant, interesting woman called Teresa Hong, who had this peculiar interaction with me when she explained that she wrote all of Donald Trump's Facebook posts. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I thought Donald Trump wrote his own Facebook posts. She said, no, I write them. And what I love so much about writing for Donald Trump is that his voice on Facebook is so authentic. And I thought, do you not see the slight irony of that? But never mind. Anyway, this is what happened. Alex Nix, his colleagues, 13 of his colleagues from Cambridge Analytica, had built up a data set of something like 5,000 data points on 250 million Americans, nearly all of it legal, from data brokerage companies, from commercially available data sets, mortgage records, car ownership, magazine subscriptions, web browsing habits. You know the kind of stuff that is available on the market. They also supplemented that with some surveys of their own to build up a profile of voters. They went over to San Antonio, Texas, and put their data sets alongside the Republican Party's data set, which, of course, is decades worth of data looking at Republican supporters. You know, are you somebody that voted every year for the Republican? Are you a member of the Republican Party? Or did you vote for Reagan and not since then? And so on. The idea was to find what they called the persuadables. The people on the fence, the people they thought maybe could be persuaded. 13.5 million of those people they identified. And about 6 weeks into the campaign, after doing all of this, they thought to themselves, we have enough persuadables in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, we think, to be able to swing the election. We think there's enough of those people that we can target, and if we can make them vote for Trump, we might actually have a chance. Everyone said that was impossible because those 3 states were thought to be strong Clinton territory. But these guys said, no, it can be done. So they worked out the profiles of those persuadables and then just bombarded them relentlessly with TV ads, but also with targeted Facebook ads using lookalike, well, not lookalike audiences, but custom audiences, which is where you can target very sort of quite almost individual people. When the results came back on the famous, infamous election day, they'd won all of those 3 states by less than 1 percentage point. They won Wisconsin by 11,000 votes. And a later analysis from Facebook found that they ran many more iterations of adverts on Facebook than the Clinton team had done. They were far more sophisticated in how they were encouraging people to take action. Content was much more shareable, and so on. And I think, when I look at all of that, I think, you know what? These guys probably did make a big difference in the US election. Not because they developed some magical psychological warfare tool to trick millions of people, but because they were slightly better at using industry standard techniques. Why is that more of a problem? Well, first, let me just explain the USP of this group. You may have heard of this. Psychographics, it was called. They said that we've got this special technique called psychographics. And this is the trick. Every single person in this room, indeed in the world, has a unique personality, but that personality can be plotted on a 5-point scale, measuring 5 different types of personality traits. It's called the Ocean score. It's been around for a very long time among psychologists. And Ocean stands for openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. So I want you to think a bit about where you might stand on each of those domains. But if you fill out a standardized survey, we can kind of work out where you are on this Ocean score. And you may remember a few years ago, there was a bit of a surge in these weird online surveys, especially on Facebook. Find out your personality type. Fill in this survey. And because we're such bloody narcissists, everybody had to do it. But somebody was collecting all of the survey results from this Ocean survey and cross-referencing them against people's Facebook likes to try to work out the pattern between the two. These guys were doing that. And the idea was, well, if we know your Ocean score, we can work out how to target an advert based on your personality type. So you, sir, are a very open guy. You're going to get an advert that's really positive and optimistic and so on. You're a bit more neurotic, I can tell from the way you're clutching your bag there. You're going to get one that's really playing to your nerves about gun control or whatever. And every single person will get a different advert based on their personality. The problem is, there's no evidence that any of that works at all. Well, they did it. They tried to do it. But it doesn't really work. We don't know whether it works, but there's no evidence at all that it does. So they were using pretty standard techniques, and they just used them better. Now, this is why I think this is, in a sense, more worrying. In a decade or so, possibly sooner than that, every single person will receive a completely unique advert from their politician that nobody else will receive. It will be unique and targeted to you. Well, the question we should be asking is not about this election or about Trump or about Brexit. It's what does an election look like when everybody is receiving a completely different message from the same candidate? How do you hold a politician to account if everybody's receiving a different message that nobody else can see? How can the regulators make sure that the adverts are honest and truthful and factual if the only person receiving it is the person who's holding the device? These are the questions that I think we should be asking, not focusing on one election or another, but the long-term consequences of this type of business model on our elections. And the reason this makes me nervous, I think back to the first election I could have voted in. I didn't bother voting, but it was Tony Blair's 1997 election. Things can only get better. And, they can get worse. But if someone had told me that in 20 years' time, elections will be determined based on unique personality profiles derived from 5,000 data points, which are then served up through a free social media platform called Facebook. We'd have thought you're completely insane. Well, I want you to wonder what it might be like in 20 years' time from now on the same trajectory. We're always thinking about these smart devices, and I think this is an interesting... We're worried a lot about the security of Internet of Things devices like this wonderful smart fridge here. But what about the data? I mean, does anyone think that a politician would not use data from devices like this if they thought it would give them a slight edge in working out what motivates you? Of course not. And in a decade when our smart clothes and our smart fridges and our smart coffee machines and our smart cars and our smart TVs are all collecting information about us, guaranteed on the current trajectory, that's going to be used to work out a profile about you and target you. And let's say you eat dinner at 6 p.m. every night and your smart fridge knows it. But it also knows that between 5 and 6 p.m., by analyzing your social, that you use a slightly higher proportion of angry words at about 5:30 because you're hungry. But we've also done analysis to work out that people who are slightly angrier are slightly more open to messages that are tough on law and order. Lo and behold, 5:30, you open your fridge, up pops a picture of Donald Trump telling you why you should vote for him because he's tough on crime. You can think of some other examples. But my fear, therefore, is that people stop trusting the process by which these elections run. And I think one of the reasons so many elections have been so contested at the moment is because they feel like the regulators aren't really on top of any of this. And if the results had gone the other way in the Trump vote or the other way in the Brexit vote, it would have been exactly the same. It would have just been the other side moaning about it. We have to make sure we can run elections that are credible, that people trust, in a world where profiles are created through smart fridges. And that is a pretty big ask. Now, the reason I have this big title about the internet killing democracy, it's not really to blame one side or another. It's simply to say we have a very easy proposition here. We have an old set of institutions and norms and behaviors that we've built up around a modern representative democracy. And we suddenly have all this new technology that doesn't follow the same logic, doesn't follow the same incentives, and the two are just in constant tension. And our job essentially is to upgrade both of them. I sometimes give an example about how this operates at the kind of level of norms and expectations. Some of you in the room will be old enough to remember how you used to get your photographs developed. Oh my God, what a pain that was. When you come back from holiday and you'd have to pay £5 at the pharmacy to get your 21 photos, and you'd come back a week later and they'd all be overexposed or they'd be underexposed and there wasn't a damn thing you could do about it. But the technology of the day now, of course, is Instagram. Immediate, personalized, redo it, add a filter, share it with everybody. Democracy is still about getting your photos developed at the pharmacy. That's how the model still works. And the world has moved on. Both sides in this conundrum, our technology and our democracy, have to find a new settlement. And I'll give you a second example before letting you out for lunch to cry into your coffee about this terrible state of affairs. I'm not going to talk about this guy, sorry. Grab me after lunch if you want to speak about Tommy Robinson. Probably not going to happen, but there you go. I spent 150 kilometers in Florida when I was with the BBC on a driverless truck like this one. I mean, this is meant to be a driverless truck, right? But I kind of feel like a lot of people just do this anyway, so might actually just be a normal truck. It's meant to be a driverless truck. I did 150 kilometers on a driverless truck. Really exciting technology, really interesting, and it's kind of symbolizes the nervousness and the excitement that we have about artificial intelligence and this slightly ridiculous moral panic that there's going to be no jobs left and everyone's going to be out of work because robots can do everything better than us. Which is silly because we are very good at knowing what jobs we might lose in an era of smart machines, but we're very bad at imagining new jobs because we don't know what they are yet. But we know all the ones we're going to lose. I'm not so worried about jobs disappearing. We'll come up with new ways of all the jobs we do now that we could never have imagined. Many of them actually, I guess many of you in this room are doing jobs that probably didn't exist 25 or 30 years ago. But I am worried about whether the losers, and there's always losers in great changes, have opportunities to become winners or feel there's routes open to them. So with that in mind, I would always ask these Silicon Valley geniuses behind this driverless technology, what is a truck driver who left school at 16 or 18, who's been trucking for 30 years, in his mid-50s, what's he going to do? What job is he going to do when the great revolution comes in trucking? I mean, we're not going to have driverless taxis on the streets. It's not for a very long time, but on long stretches of road, yeah, I think it's possible fairly soon. What's he going to do, the trucker? And they'd always say the same thing. Oh, they should probably retrain as a machine learning specialist or a web programmer. And I think, what planet are you living on, mate? This is not going to happen. You sound like Gordon Brown. You're absolutely mad. And this is kind of my nervousness. What are those truckers actually going to do if we can't create the opportunities? There's many opportunities, the improvements in productivity, the improvements in the product, the products that we create, the amazing new jobs are the truckers going to have the chance to get some of those jobs? And use that as an analogy or a sort of example for many other industries too. And I want to read you, or you can probably read this. Can you read that at the back? I think that's probably clear enough, isn't it? A couple of interesting sentences on this subject, which to me, reading it now, it reads rather like a Guardian editorial. But it's not a Guardian editorial. It was written in 1995 by this guy, Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber's Manifesto. In 1995, 94, 95, when he wrote this, nobody even owned a computer. This just read like complete insanity. But he, of course, murdered 3 people in the 80s and 90s, injured many more, believed that technology was becoming a tool of oppression. I mean, this actually seems like weirdly prescient, doesn't it? But he murdered 3 people, injured many more, because he believed that technology was becoming a tool of oppression. He's a kind of vanguard of a tech backlash, and a tech backlash that I think we're currently going through at the moment. People are getting frustrated, whether they're getting frustrated because of this guy, or the so-called rise of the sort of populist right, or because of this guy, and the idea that, not that fridge, him, this guy, the idea that people are meddling in our elections and we don't know what's happening and we're out of control, we can't control this stuff, we don't have a way of being in charge anymore. People are getting very nervous about the role technology is playing. I mean, 4 or 5 years ago, we were all so excited. We were very optimistic about the wonders of technology. I think that now people are getting very, very nervous and worried. This is a very big problem. And it's a problem for everybody in the room because the climate in which, sorry, I'll get him off the screen. The climate in which policies are made, the opportunities to use data, the fact that people are willing to share data, does depend on the mood that people have towards technology. And it's changing fast. And the worry I have, if we do not make sure, however we do this, whether it's through policies, through our software design, through the opportunities we try to offer people, is that we won't have people, the truckers, sitting back and saying, well, it's okay, because in 50 years or so, my grandchildren will be safer and accidents will have decreased by 95% on the roads, and that's fine. They're not going to do anything of the sort. What they're going to do is something like this. This is a driverless car that is essentially immobilized because somebody's drawn a stop road signs around it with like a big can of white spray paint. And what's going to happen, obviously, in my opinion, is that the truckers are going to be out late at night trying to mess with the machines. How can we change it? How can we manipulate these machines so they crash or they don't work anymore? because that's what people do when they feel that their industry is changing and they don't have the opportunities to do anything about it. So how do we avert this in my last couple of minutes? Well, like I said, it's partly about, as I understand it, both sides, democracy and technology, coming to a new settlement. Some of that is down to us in the room. I think some of us who work in this area have got to the sort of value and importance of data and privacy, which you hear over and over and over again. I mean, you must be bored of hearing about this. But the reason I think it matters is because we need to avoid this stuff. We need to make sure that people don't dramatically turn against technology, because then all the wonderful benefits that it can bring will be lost as well. This really matters in an age of Internet of Things devices, because I'll be honest with you, if I wake up one morning and I come downstairs to get my coffee and I found that a Ukrainian hacker had put ransomware on my coffee machine and I had to pay half a Bitcoin to get my coffee in them, that coffee machine is flying out the window and I'm never buying an Internet-enabled device again in my life. That's how important it's going to be, because as everything becomes a computer, and security of the internet is about security of your daily life, it becomes so important that it's good, because people are going to just smash these bloody things up if they don't think it works for them. And I think there's going to be wonderful opportunities too. I don't know, I haven't been told I'm not allowed to say the word GDPR, but I know it's a bit of a, people are sick of hearing that one too. But I think the most exciting and interesting part of that is data portability, the rights that you suddenly have to be able to take data away from companies. Now, the problem is, I am not going to go and ask Facebook or Google or any of these platforms to give me my data, because I don't know what the hell I'm supposed to do with it. Kind of, in a loose sense, would like it, but what am I going to do with a big file of my web browsing history? Who am I going to take it to? Am I going to sell it to someone? That's ridiculous. But I think there's going to be a really exciting suite of products that might help me to be able to do that. A sort of tertiary private sector market in data exchange, privacy-enhanced software. And I want people, as far as possible, to actually be able to use those things. And if we do, I think that these problems, this risk, this danger, that we chuck all of this out, is going to be, well, if not averted, is going to be at least minimized. And then technology and democracy will start to get along much better again. And on that note, I'll stop, and thanks for listening, and enjoy your lunch.